The Roman Empire tried to break one Spanish deacon with torture, but St. Vincent's refusal to deny Christ turned him into one of the most famous martyrs in Christian history. The Roman Empire tried to silence one Spanish deacon so brutally that his name became impossible to forget. St. Vincent of Saragossa, also remembered as Vincent the Deacon, is celebrated on January 22nd in the Universal Catholic calendar. In the dioceses of the United States, his optional memorial is kept on January 23rd, because January 22nd is observed nationally as the day of prayer for the legal protection of unborn children. Vincent lived in Roman Hispania in the late 3rd and early 4th centuries, when Christianity was still illegal. Most sources place his birth in the region of northern Spain, often linked with Huesca, though the documentation is early and limited. He is firmly connected with Zaragoza, modern Zaragoza, where he served the local church as a deacon. A deacon in that era was not a junior priest, but a public minister trusted with preaching, charity, and church administration. Vincent is remembered as an effective speaker, and tradition says his voice carried the bishop's message when needed. The bishop connected to Vincent is Saint Valerius of Saragossa, a real historical figure in the Spanish Church. Accounts commonly explain that Valerius had difficulty speaking clearly, so Vincent often acted as his spokesman. That detail matters because it frames Vincent not as a lone hero, but as a servant loyal to his bishop. The crisis came during the Great Persecution, the imperial campaign associated with Emperor Diocletian and his colleagues. In Spain, local enforcement could be savage, depending on the governor and the city's politics. Vincent and Valerius were arrested and taken for trial, with the proceedings tied to Valencia, then called Valencia. Later texts name the Roman governor as Dacian, presented as the official determined to break Christian resistance. The Church preserves the core claim that Vincent was imprisoned and tortured for refusing to renounce Christ. When you read the ancient tradition, notice that it is not written like modern journalism. The earliest major literary witness is the Spanish poet Prudentius, writing around the year 400, long after the events. Prudentius praises Vincent's endurance and describes the drama of his sufferings in vivid, poetic detail. A second early witness is St Augustine, who preached sermons on Vincent's feast in North Africa. Augustine's attention shows how widely Vincent's cult spread, reaching far beyond Spain within a century. Later, acts of Vincent's martyrdom circulated and were read in churches, though scholars debate how early they are. So, we can be confident about the broad outline while treating many colorful details as devotional tradition. Vincent's trial is remembered as a clash between imperial power and a conscience that would not be bought. Authorities demanded compliance, which in that period could include sacrificing to pagan gods or surrendering sacred texts. Vincent refused, not because he wanted pain, but because he believed Christ's lordship was non-negotiable. Valerius, the bishop, was ultimately spared execution in the narratives, often described as being banished instead. Vincent, the deacon, became the primary target for exemplary punishment in Valencia. The Roman martyrology summarizes the tradition as a sequence of imprisonment, starvation, and brutal torments. Art later associated Vincent with symbols of suffering, like a gridiron or fire, reflecting the memory of torture. The point of these stories is not gore, but the claim that Vincent's spirit did not collapse. Christians remembered him as a man whose faith stayed clear when his body was treated as disposable. The tradition says the jailers tried to weaken him through isolation, hunger, and humiliation. When that failed, they escalated to public torture meant to intimidate other believers. Instead, the story turned the intimidation around because endurance became a form of preaching. Augustine even treats Vincent as a model whose victory was interior, not political. That is why a deacon, not an emperor, ended up with the lasting monument. Vincent's death is commonly dated to around the year 304, during the height of the persecution. The place of death is Valencia, which still honors him as a patron and local martyr. From very early on, Christians treated Vincent as a saint, meaning a faithful witness already believed to be with God. This is why there is no later beatification date to record for him. Vincent belongs to the category called pre-congregation, saints recognized by ancient cult and universal veneration. In other words, no pope needed to run a modern canonization process to make Vincent a saint. His sainthood was established by the Church's memory, liturgy, and the steady witness of centuries. If you want miracles in the strict canonization dossier sense, Vincent does not have that kind of record. But Christian tradition does attach miraculous or providential signs to his story, especially after his death. One famous motif is the raven, said to have guarded his body when it was exposed to be dishonored. That image became so strong that ravens appear in his iconography as a symbol of God's protection. Another tradition says his persecutors tried to dispose of the body at sea, yet it returned to shore. These stories function like a theological claim in narrative form, saying martyrdom does not erase dignity. They also explain, in a legendary way, how Christians could recover relics for burial and remembrance. After the persecution ended and the Church regained legal freedom, devotion to Vincent grew rapidly. The fact that Augustine preached on him indicates that Vincent's feast was meaningful across the Mediterranean. Prudentius, writing in Spain, shows that the cult was strong enough to inspire major Christian literature. Together, those sources give Vincent a rare advantage among early martyrs, because he is remembered early and widely. Over time, churches claimed relics connected to him, which was common with famous martyrs. In Valencia, devotion remained rooted in local memory of his martyrdom and burial traditions. In Portugal, Vincent became especially associated with Lisbon and its identity as a Christian city after the Reconquista. Lisbon preserves a strong tradition that Vincent's relics arrived by ship in the 12th century. One detailed account places their ceremonial arrival at Lisbon's port on 15th September 1173, with public veneration following. Popular storytelling added the famous pair of crows that escorted the relics, reinforcing the raven's symbolism. These elements shaped why Vincent is one of Lisbon's great patrons, alongside the city's cathedral tradition. Other places also claimed relics, including a medieval claim connected to Castries in southern France. With early saints, relic traditions can conflict, so it is safest to say multiple medieval translations were reported. What does not conflict is the basic point that Vincent's cult was international, not merely Spanish. His patronages reflect that spread, reaching cities, trades, and seafarers who adopted him as a protector. He is invoked by vintners and wine workers, partly because of his name, and partly because Spanish devotion linked him to vineyards. He is invoked by sailors and coastal communities, likely reinforced by the sea burial legends and Lisbon's maritime identity. He is also linked with brickmakers and practical trades, showing how saints were woven into everyday Christian labor. In art, Vincent is usually shown wearing the dalmatic, the distinctive vestment of a deacon. That choice matters because it honors his office, not just his suffering. It reminds viewers that martyrdom is not about chasing death, but about faithful service when pressured. Vincent's story also shows how the early church understood preaching. He likely preached in ordinary settings, not grand basilicas, because the church still lived under threat. Yet his witness ended up preached in basilicas later, because the martyr became a public teacher after death. If you strip away the legendary ornaments, the core remains sharp. A Roman official demanded conformity, and a Christian deacon refused to call Caesar his god. The state used pain to force surrender, and the church used memory to turn pain into meaning. That is why Vincent is sometimes called a proto-martyr of Spain, because he became one of the first great Spanish witnesses known across the world. Even today, the official church lists him in the martyrology and celebrates his feast as an example of steadfastness. And the Vatican's own saints' calendar still presents him plainly as a courageous deacon who would not deny the faith. For a modern viewer, Vincent is easy to misunderstand if you think the point is being tough. The deeper point is that power always tests what you truly worship. Vincent's test was overt and violent, but the logic is familiar because compromise still has a price. His feast, planted in January, is like a cold season reminder that faith is proved under pressure. When the church remembers him, it is not celebrating the empire's cruelty. It is celebrating a man who kept the hierarchy of loyalties straight with God above fear. It is also celebrating the diaconate itself, a ministry of service that can end in sacrifice. So on January 22nd, or January 23rd, if you follow the US calendar, St. Vincent stands as a compact biography of Christian resistance. He begins as a helper in Zaragoza, loyal to his bishop, doing the work that keeps a church alive. He ends in Valencia as a martyr, and then continues across centuries as a name spoken at the altar. And the final irony is that the empire's violence became the very engine that carried his memory everywhere.